Right now, something unexpected has happened in Pokrovsk. The Ukrainian armed forces have turned the front upside down. The Russians are in disbelief. Columns torn apart, thousands dead. Ukrainian forces broke through where no one expected. Putin's incredible Plan B has gone up in flames. A sensation. The decisive battle is already underway. Shock. Ukraine has unleashed its Doomsday weapon. The deadly conveyor is already running. Missiles and drones of our own production are turning the front into dust. Secret Neptunes and Flamingos will go on the hunt in the very heart of Russia. The Kremlin is in a panic. What new weapons are preparing to deliver a devastating blow? You've never seen anything like this before. Breaking news at this very moment. Finland is throwing all its forces to the border. A new war is looming. NATO has urgently deployed troops. Putin's military nightmare has become reality. Thousands of soldiers and a storm of fire are already at Russia's border. What this will mean for Russia, you'll be shocked when you hear it. Urgent. The Kremlin has been blown up from the inside. Gerasimov is on the edge of the abyss. The noose around the chief of the general staff's neck is tightening. Pokrovsk has turned into the end for the Russian army. A sensation. The hellish reality of the Russian army. Unexpected details have surfaced. The Kremlin tried to hide this. All this and more in our program Hotspot. Urgent. Hell on the front line. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has revealed the truth about the encirclement in Pokrovsk. You have to hear this. The Ukrainian armed forces broke through to the front line. Enemy columns were torn apart. The Russian command is in shock. Plan B is being hastily developed. They were not prepared for such a blow. The decisive battle has begun. These shots have blown up the internet. Watch for all the sensational details.
A Ukrainian crew in a German Leopard tank crushes a Russian FPV ZH-Dun drone with a skid on the road. Apparently, its operator missed the moment when he could have launched the deadly bird into the sky. Right now, the situation in the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad direction is very difficult, if not critical. Almost half of all clashes on the front line are happening specifically in the Pokrovsk direction. Russian channels are reporting that the city is essentially encircled. The Ukrainian armed forces have no chance, but the occupying troops might make a gesture of goodwill.
The Russian Ministry of Defense has received an order from the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Federation to ensure unhindered passage for foreign journalists, including Ukrainian ones, when they request the command of the Ukrainian armed forces to visit the areas where Ukrainian troops are encircled: Krasnoarmeysk, Dmitrove, and Kupiansk. The Russian command is prepared, if necessary, to cease hostilities for 5 to 6 hours in these areas, and also to provide corridors for the unhindered entry and exit of groups of foreign media representatives, including Ukrainian ones, provided that safety is guaranteed for both journalists and Russian military personnel.
In order to showcase the supposedly dire situation of the Ukrainian armed forces, the Kremlin wants to provide a corridor for Western journalists. The speech
is about an attempt to wage psychological and media warfare, to draw attention to the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces are in a bad situation, but in the context that Putin wants, with excessive dramatization. According
to the General Staff of the Ukrainian armed forces, there is no talk of any encirclement. Fighting is already taking place on the outskirts of both Mirnohrad and Pokrovsk. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that around 170,000 Russian soldiers are concentrated near Pokrovsk. At the same time, the supply of ammunition and provisions to the Ukrainian army is being carried out systematically. All the talk about encirclement is Russian disinformation.
There is no blockade of our defense forces in Pokrovsk by the enemy. These are merely statements of Russian propaganda that do not correspond to reality. The enemy's occupying army is indeed increasing pressure in the Pokrovsk direction, particularly in the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration area. The situation in Pokrovsk remains difficult and dynamic. Separate groups of enemy infantry are infiltrating Pokrovsk and attempting to move and concentrate within this settlement. General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
In reality, there is no real prospect of encircling the Ukrainian forces defending Pokrovsk, because if the situation takes a truly unfavorable turn, these military personnel who are currently stationed in the area can withdraw and evacuate to the north. Supply is ongoing. What does this mean? It means that during the supply of these convoys, which could involve trucks or other vehicles such as smaller vans or cars that are less noticeable than large trucks, the choice of vehicle is often intentional. Using less conspicuous vehicles helps avoid drawing attention, making the supply process more discreet and secure. Nevertheless, losses in these convoys could be much higher than in other cases, but still the supply continues.
Despite the difficult situation, even if the USSR has to leave Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, the occupying forces will lose a huge amount of equipment and personnel. And at the same time, this will not change the overall situation along the front line. This is also confirmed by the intelligence services of European countries.
Of course, it is also clear that sooner or later Ukraine will have to withdraw its units from the Pokrovsk district. But, as I have said before, the capture of the Pokrovsk district by Russian forces will not determine the overall situation in Ukraine. Hence Kiviselg, head of the intelligence center of the Estonian Defense Forces.
Putin claimed that Pokrovsk would be under the control of the Russian army. That was a year ago. In reality, the Kremlin's plans have still not been realized.
Shock! Ukraine is blowing up the front. Our engineers are launching a new era of weaponry, missiles and drones of our own production. More powerful, more precise, and deadlier. And that's not all. Neptunes and Flamingos are breaking into the heart of Russia. What secret new developments are already preparing to deliver a crushing blow to Russia? Find out in the report.
Ukraine has destroyed a Russian Oreshnik on Russian territory. This was announced by the head of the SBU, Vasil Malyuk. Exactly what weapon was used by the Ukrainian special services has not been disclosed. Nevertheless, Ukraine's arms industry is expanding significantly every year. Ukraine is successfully using Neptune and Flamingo missiles together to strike Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky told journalists about this and noted that while this is not widespread use, there are already the first tangible results regarding the weapon.
Missile attacks that are carried out with the assistance and support of systems such as Flamingo or Neptunes will be accompanied by a significantly large number of various different types and categories of unmanned systems, including drones, with each one of these unmanned aerial vehicles performing its own specific and unique function. Some will distract enemy air defense systems, some will destroy air defense systems, some will create intentional interference, and some will suppress them using electronic warfare.
The president also mentioned the use of the Polyanitsia drone missile, which has already struck enemy military depots dozens of times. Zelensky named the use of the Ruta drone missile, which for the first time flew 250 kilometers and struck an offshore platform, as the second positive trend.
We have quite a lot of developments specifically in drone missiles. There are some military analysts and experts who say that these are all just small-sized cruise missiles, nothing more. However, I don't quite agree with that assessment, for one simple and clear reason. Usually, a cruise missile is defined as something that has some kind of wing mechanism or aerodynamic surface that allows it to glide or fly efficiently through the air. That is, the missile is launched either from the air or from the ground, then these wings unfold and they create aerodynamic lift, which allows the cruise missile to fly long distances. Our Ukrainian rocket drones, for example, have a fixed wing that has always been permanently installed and does not require any specialized launchers or specialized casings that are inserted into these launchers to ensure standardization.
However, the greatest success for the Ukrainians is considered to be the mass use of the kamikaze drone Lyuty, which numbered up to 300 UAVs.
Lyuty is a system with a slightly different concept. It is neither external nor internal, and it has nothing in common with the Shahed. Both its control system and its guidance system are unique, and the elements present there, image recognition, AI-assisted targeting, have absolutely nothing in common with the Shaheds.
The security service of Ukraine's naval drones have improved in both payload and range, now capable of striking targets over 1,500 kilometers away. They were first used in 2022 during the attack on Russian Black Sea Fleet ships in Sevastopol Bay. Since then, these drones have been constantly evolving and improving.
Our security service of Ukraine now has significantly more ways to destroy targets than it did before. And it's not just the Malyuk anymore, there are many other things as well. If there are tasks for the Malyuks are used. If there are tasks for other drones are used. Since
August of this year, it was announced that the Flamingo missile has entered serial production, capable of striking targets at a distance of 3,000 kilometers. The modernized Neptune has already been successfully hitting ground targets for a year now. Currently, at a range of up to 400 kilometers, it has been stated that soon it will be able to strike at a range of 1,000 as well.
Urgent. Finland is preparing for battle. Panic has broken out in Russia. Finland is moving thousands of troops, tanks, and artillery right up to the border. A real military nightmare for Putin. The Finnish army is flexing its muscles while Moscow trembles with fear. What does all this mean for the Kremlin? Watch right now.
Acting proactively. Finland is deploying 15,000 troops to the border with Russia. The Finns are preparing for the largest series of military exercises of the year. Conscripts, reservists, professional soldiers, as well as units from allied countries Sweden and the United Kingdom will take part. According to the country's ground forces, the purpose of the maneuvers is to test the army's readiness to defend the state and to strengthen cooperation with NATO allies. This is
the response by the NATO bloc to aggressive actions from the occupying country. On the territory of the occupying country, in close proximity to Finland's borders, there is currently intensive engineering construction of new military bases for the occupying country's army. This refers to Petrozavodsk, Kandalaksha, and other settlements on the territory of the Russian Federation, which indicates the redeployment of Russian army units directly near the borders of Finland.
one of the largest episodes will be the Lively Century exercise, which will take place in southern Finland from November 27th to December 4th. About 7,000 participants will be involved in it.
The Russian Federation has constantly made it clear to Finland that it poses a threat to this country. Moreover, there has been a constant element of military political pressure on Finland with the aim accordingly of maintaining its so-called neutral status. In other words, there is not the slightest reason to say that friendly, good neighborly relations were established after the occupation of Finnish territories. The Russian military presence near Finland's borders was constantly increasing.
In the spring of 2023, Finland became a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This provoked a sharp reaction from Russia, worsening bilateral relations. In addition, Finland imposed sanctions against Russia and refused to grant asylum to Russians fleeing mobilization. After that, Putin's lackeys began blaming the Finns for every sin at every opportunity. For example, in September, former ALCO president Dmitry Medvedev decided that Finland was preparing to attack Russia.
After joining NATO under the guise of defensive measures, Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia, apparently setting up a staging ground for an attack on us.
Moreover, according to him, Russia supposedly legally deserves reparations from the Finns for World War II, claiming that they paid too little at the time thanks to the goodwill of the Russians.
This is precisely an element of diplomatic and military pressure on Finland. Moreover, similar statements are being made not only regarding Finland but also accordingly regarding Sweden. This concerns the island of Gotland, and accordingly regarding Poland as well.
Following the alcoholic Medvedev, the chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, also made aggressive statements. He stated, or rather threatened, that Russia is ready to defend itself at any moment since they have everything they need. Medvedev had previously spoken about this as well.
We cannot simply ignore the fact that at this point in time, Finland is currently a member of the North Atlantic Alliance, and this in turn determines changes in our military approaches to organizing the border and to repelling possible unfriendly actions.
The political and military leaders of Finland are doing everything they can to emphasize that an attack by Russia would be an act of suicidal madness.
Acts meaning actions of direct confrontation with the NATO bloc involving direct and open opposition to the alliance, and accordingly the first countries that will be in the focus of the occupying country's army are accordingly Finland and the Baltic states. Therefore, the risks are quite high. This is also evidenced by the formation of new military units in the Leningrad military district and accordingly the deployment of military infrastructure directly near the borders with Finland.
Earlier, it became known that Finland had offered NATO to establish a new military base on its territory. Helsinki could become a base for large NATO reconnaissance drones.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
At this very moment, hell has broken out in the Kremlin. Gerasimov is on the verge of collapse, Putin is furious, and the noose around the chief of the general staff's neck is tightening. Pokrovsk has become a death sentence for the Russian army. Shocking insider information from the Kremlin. A successor is already prepared. How and why is Putin losing control over the army? All the details are in the report.
The last leg of Valery Gerasimov's chair has broken. The movement Atesh, citing information from officers of one of the Russian military groupings, reports that the Kremlin is extremely dissatisfied with the general's work and, to put it mildly, his untruthful reports from the front.
Putin gave Gerasimov a deadline to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November. This order is the general's last chance to keep his position. Against the backdrop of this ultimatum, there has been a sharp increase in meat grinder tactics on the Pokrovsk front. The command is sending huge waves of personnel into suicidal attacks in order to fulfill the order at any cost.
Unattractive and lacking charisma, Valery Gerasimov is the man to whom Putin owes his first presidential term. It was he who, while Moscow was preparing to check boxes on ballots, led the combat operations for the village of Komsomolskoye. This 15-day struggle became the key and final battle of the Russians' second Chechen campaign. Gerasimov delivered victory to candidate Putin, marching over the countless corpses of Russian soldiers and local residents.
The residents were allowed to leave the village, but they weren't allowed to go far. They were forced to remain for several days on the outskirts of the village. But in reality, they were actually being used as a human shield. In
2012, it was Gerasimov who provided the country's leadership with the formula for hybrid warfare. At that time, he insisted that it was necessary to move away from traditional wars toward destabilization on the ground.
The path to this lies in actively using the protest potential of the fifth column.
A little later, the Gerasimov formula was tested by the Russians first in Crimea and then in Donbass. According to Bellingcat investigators, it was Valery Gerasimov in 2014 who initiated the deployment of regular Russian troops near Ukrainian Ilovaisk and the transfer of Russian military equipment to the separatists, from which, incidentally, the Malaysian Boeing was shot down. Mute Gerasim, as the Grey Cardinal of the General Staff is called among themselves, has outlasted all his loud and flamboyant critics.
Eat them to hell! We are running low on ammunition. Our available supply has dropped by 70%, leaving us in a dangerous situation. Shoigu, Gerasimov, we urgently need your support to address this shortage. Where exactly is the ammunition, please?
Prigozhin has been blown up. Strelkov Gherkin is rotting behind bars. After the scandal, it was thanks to Valery Gerasimov's efforts that the favorite of Russian Z-patriots, General Popov, was sent there. Even Shoigu was carried out of the Ministry of Defense. But mute Gerasimov still remains in his chair, even though rumors of his dismissal have been spreading actively since last summer. And now supposedly there are actually real grounds for them. If Gerasimov fails to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November, he will be replaced by Viktor Viktorovich Paznikir, who was born and raised not far from the Ukrainian city of Sumy. Not much is known about him. He was awarded the Order of Zhukov by a classified decree, and in February 2024, he received the rank of Colonel General.
It's hard to call this military leader a public figure. His name was first mentioned in the media after the start of the operation in Syria. The Lieutenant General held the position of First Deputy Chief of the Main Operational Directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. His briefings were dedicated to the situation around Palmyra and Aleppo. Poznikir also spoke about the work of the Russian military police in the Middle East and criticized the presence of American naval forces in the region. The Lieutenant General's statement about the US plans to develop a global missile defense system caused a major stir. At the Moscow Conference on International Security, Poznikir called Washington a likely adversary of Moscow. To overcome missile defense systems, Viktor Viktorovich proposed using the Sarmat and Avangard complexes.
It is still unknown whether Gerasimov will be able to outsmart his adversaries again and hold his position. Since the summer, the occupiers have been amassing troops in the Pokrovsk direction and probing for weak spots in the Ukrainian defense. On their side are Russia's vast resources, which are spared no expense to achieve their goals, and a huge number of fortune seekers lured by contracts and the new status of hero. And in 2025, Pokrovsk could become an important and decisive battle, much like the Chechen village of Komsomolskoye once was.
Shock. Putin has gone too far. A real nightmare has begun in Russia. Single fathers are not being released from the army. The hellish reality of Russian troops, abuse, inhumanity, and the utter madness of the regime. What horrors are happening behind the barracks walls, and could this turn into a real rebellion against the regime? Stay tuned.
The wounded and maimed are being sent into assaults. Military personnel who are deemed undesirable are simply eliminated, and if someone doesn't want to sign a contract, they'll end up signing it anyway. But the newly minted soldier only finds out about this after the fact. It's also nearly impossible to resign from the army. Even single fathers who by law should be released without issue are not allowed to leave. Meanwhile, their children are simply placed in orphanages.
According to the single fathers interviewed by Verska, commanders may simply refuse to accept their resignation reports from the start, verbally denying their requests to leave. If the documents are accepted, they might get lost. But the soldiers continue to serve while their children temporarily stay with relatives or are placed in orphanages.
So it turns out that even with a living parent, the children are orphans. But really, what can be said about discharging a healthy man when even severely wounded soldiers are not written off in the Russian army?
They looked at us. So what? You're fine, just missing a leg? Oh, that's just a leg. Even though the sky's under me, it's just a leg. There's another guy sitting here like that too. What was I trying to say with this? They came in, looked around, asked who was there and for what reason, and were told the reason. All right, guys, got it. And they left them. These
occupiers will soon be sent on their final meat assault. The fact that some of them are missing limbs doesn't concern anyone. Their commanders just use them as disposable cannon fodder. Some occupiers still believe that the state will help them, so they complain to the Kremlin ombudsman about being denied medical care or receiving poor treatment. The number of such complaints has quadrupled in 2 years, from 459 to 1,976.
The applicant's husband, after receiving treatment at a frontline hospital, was sent to the Military Medical Commission to determine his fitness for military service. Upon arriving at the military unit to receive the order and referral for the Military Medical Commission, he was sent to the front line. Since May 2024, he has been listed as missing in action.
After injuries or due to pre-existing health problems, not all soldiers are given enough time for full and proper rehabilitation. It happens that a fighter is sent beyond the line despite doctors' recommendations to continue treatment and the need for rehabilitation. As a result, military personnel who are physically incapable of performing combat missions end up on the front lines.
But at least these ones went to the front themselves. And there are cases where Russian men find out after the fact that they have changed their occupation. Black
recruitment, especially by black recruiters. These individuals have essentially turned into modern-day slave traders. We basically have a form of slave trading going on, actively supplying people to the front lines.
Everyone, without exception, ends up in the crossfire. Cerebral palsy, mental illness, missing limbs, all of that is nothing. The Russian army will find a use for it. The local administrations, of course, know all about it. They even encourage and assist. In
my native village of Cherkasy, they got a guy from Siberia drunk. They married him off to an elderly woman of loose morals and low social responsibility. They sent him to the front where he was killed, and now they're claiming compensation as his wife, even though he had never even seen her in his life.
His commanders can help with the liquidation of such a Russian soldier. The occupiers complain that unwanted soldiers from the special military operation are often sent on suicide assaults. One of these roles during an assault is called a beacon among the military. The occupier is sent without a weapon or body armor to expose the firing positions of Ukrainian forces.
You just run one way and there's a blocking detachment behind you that won't let you go back. Your only chance to survive is to get wounded and be taken prisoner like Hechad.
The occupiers admit not only to commanders eliminating their own kind, but also to killing civilians. A Russian soldier recounted how his commander entered the wrong coordinates, which resulted in an artillery strike on a village. Many people died, including children. The soldier only learned about what happened after the administration of the so-called LNR complained to the command.
Basically, we mixed up the targets. In short, the Grad and Uragan systems, they were marked the same way on the grid. The one who was on duty, sitting at the command post, he did it. He just basically mixed up the captains. So what do I care? They give me the numbers to memorize, to call the battalion commander. So he says, how is he feeling? Yeah, he's fine. Well, 12 kids, you say it's a mess, and 9 women.
Of course, the incident was hushed up, and on Russian television, they reported that there were supposedly Ukrainian servicemen in that village. And these are just the stories that have come out in the last few days. In reality, the situation is much worse. And with each passing day, it keeps getting worse.
Urgent! A new surge in propaganda. Solovyov lost it live on air. You'll be surprised when you hear it. Scandals, shouting, hysteria. Is Trump really the enemy again? What's going on in the studios of Russian propagandists? Watch for all the details.
This week in Russia, so much absurdity happened that you can't fit it all into one episode. People who are usually called politicians, journalists, and priests continue to display unprecedented madness live on air and on social media. For example, a Russian Zed patriot who just yesterday was happily waving the flag and insisting that the whole world respects us in silence suddenly fell into despair. The reason for this is the harsh reality. It turned out that, to quote, "Nobody loves Russia."
Kazakhstan is already in the process of switching over to using American-made weapons and military equipment. This transition marks a significant shift in their defense strategy. And
the upcoming meetings between Trump and Russia's southern neighbors could end in anything but brotherly.
A strong, mutually beneficial and collaborative partnership. And will it start? Hell, no need to guess. It's already started. Why the hell do they need this? We need to deal with this issue too. Damn it, there are no Mavics. How are the guys supposed to go on recon for fuck's sake? What the hell's going on? And
the well-known fascist Stalinist Kalashnikov publicly expressed his outrage. Like, how can this be? Russia still doesn't control the airspace over Ukraine.
So you can't achieve air superiority. You're forced to fight like in World War I. I see this in their reports. We got really lucky that we didn't face an enemy with very strong air forces.
Moreover, Kalashnikov suddenly thanks fate that Russia isn't actually fighting the collective NATO. We
wouldn't have even just these limited successes if we had faced opposing forces that
possess modern aviation capabilities. Europeans, by the way, already have this advantage. Recently,
a brilliantly simple explanation for the mystery of thousands of missing persons appeared in Russia. It turns out it's all about simple arithmetic. If a person is not officially recognized as killed, there is no need to pay any compensation, benefits, or allowances for them.
Missing persons are one of the most painful issues in the army. And people, the families, mothers, wives, yes, that is daughters, sons, and so on. Where are they and how? At least give me something to bury, and this uncertainty is the hardest part. The system by and large doesn't care. It just doesn't care. The more people are missing rather than confirmed dead, the fewer the payouts. That's it. And that's basically how they operate.
The representative of the Russian Orthodox Church, who also happens to be priest Shakin, solemnly declared that people who want to live cannot be trusted.
I understand that not everyone can be trusted. Not everyone is ready to die. Many want to survive. And those people who want to survive can be very dangerous because they might betray everyone.
Meanwhile, inspiring news is coming from temporarily occupied Donetsk. Local residents are increasingly mastering innovative survival technologies. Now, rain is not just weather, but a strategic resource.
When there's no water in the DNR, we collect water in the rain. That's how it works. How else are we supposed to collect it? Well, what else can we do? Well, I'll hold it. Well...
Meanwhile, Solovyov is having another meltdown. On air, he promised to destroy the entire French contingent if they show up in Ukraine. Well...
That's more than enough for a day and a half of war. But we'll kill you all. Why are you getting involved? Why? Well, in the end, we'll end up coming to Paris again. You have to understand, this pathetic nobody Macron is going to doom you, the French, to terrible suffering.
However, the TV host lost his temper and started shouting, lashing out at his own colleagues who dared to question the necessity of strikes on Kiev.
Leave Kiev. It'll be easier. Leave Kiev?
Listen, it seems you've already left since there's no way to stay there.
Just got up and left. Just like the guys in Belgorod are being forced to do now. Now am I supposed to?
Sorry, people, Kiev? No.
Don't count on it.
Don't count on it. That's it. Kiev is gone. And it will never exist again. Why? Because you cursed this city. You betrayed it. You betrayed its holy places. You desecrated them. You have no right to be there because you are demons who have betrayed your own history and your own faith.
It's quite a spectacle. His face is red, his voice is breaking, and his arguments dissolve into shrieking. You can see that with each passing day it's getting harder and harder for this so-called journalist to keep up the facade. A nervous breakdown is just around the corner. Moreover, Solovyov is essentially calling for the destruction of the population of major Ukrainian cities on air. He openly says that there will be no normal life in the major cities of Ukraine.
There will be no life in Kharkiv or in Poltava or in Mykolaiv or in Odessa. These cities will not exist, and neither will Kyiv. If the civilians do not realize that they have been chosen as expendable material and do not overthrow their Nazi government, and if you don't have the strength, at least leave those cities. Understand that you are being used as a human shield. If you don't have the strength to leave, I'm sorry. Let me remind you of the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah. This
is not just pathos, it's a symptom that things are not going according to plan. The worse the situation gets, the louder and dumber the television aggression becomes. Such public aggression doesn't belong in a victory magazine, but rather leads to international criminal legal consequences. To put it mildly, talk of mass destruction is quite enough material for court cases in The Hague.